Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Greene from Nashville, Tennessee, and this is Chthonica, the show about horror in all its fictional forms. And I am so excited because today we're going to be talking about horror and religion. And I've got a star-studded panel here. I'll introduce everyone in just a moment. I do want to go ahead and acknowledge, though, that probably a lot of the conversation will be sourced from the Jewish and Christian traditions that are so prominent in North America. And that's certainly not meant to exclude anyone's religious experience or religious background or their perspective. In fact, I'm going to put a post with a link to this episode on my Substack. And I would love for people of any religious background or no religious background to come and share their perspectives on the intersection between religion and horror. So we're excited to kick off this conversation. But today I'm really thrilled because we've got Associate Dean at the Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit. We've got Brandon Grafius with us today. Brandon, how are you?
Doing all right. So glad to be having this conversation with you, Greg. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you wrote two books that we're really going to kind of kick off the conversation with: Lurking Under the Surface, Horror, Religion, and the Questions That Haunt Us. And then just a few weeks ago, you launched Scared by the Bible, The Roots of Horror in Scripture, which I, as a kid who was reading his King James Version at 12 years old, I just love that, because there are some scary, distressing, disturbing passages in the Holy Scripture. So thrilled to have you here. And folks, you can follow Brandon at brandonrgrafius.com. Also on the show today, we've got Gemma Files, who is, of course, if you read horror fiction at all, you know who Gemma is. You're probably most familiar with her because of books like the critically acclaimed novel Experimental Film, and then her most recent collection is called Little Horn. Just came out again a few weeks ago. Gemma, so good to have you here. How are you today?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to it.
Yes. And then also we've got on the call today Brian Evenson, whose books include, well, these four awesome books with a look at those covers. It's crazy, novels and a collection in there. And also his most recent collection is Good Night, Sleep Tight stories, and actually, talked to Brian about that several months ago. Actually, I guess it was around this time last year. So you can go and look up that episode of Chthonica as well. Brian, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Oh, and you can follow Gemma Files on her. I would go to Blue Sky, follow her on Blue Sky, and then Brian's website, brianevanson.com as well. All right. So let's kick this off with if you grew up in the 80s, you're likely very aware of the contentious relationship between organized religion and the arts and culture of horror, the books, the comics, the music of certainly, and of course the movies. And yet, like a pair of teenagers in an 80s slasher film, religion and horror can't seem to keep their hands off each other. Brandon, tell us a little bit about what is that? How do you characterize the relationship between religion and horror? It's a big, broad question, but give it a stab.
Oh, give it a stab, yeah. So I think there are all kinds of connections, and these are really the questions that have been animating my research for like the last decade or so now. For me, a big part of this new book is the realization that there is a lot of horror in the Bible, and wondering why that is. Figuring let's take that seriously. Let's acknowledge that there's horror and see what we can do with that. See if maybe horror might have something to teach us, if that could possibly be what it's doing in the Bible. So I think there are all kinds of thematic connections, ways they wrap around each other, because they really are ways of asking the same sets of questions. They help us think through questions about life and death, questions about our personal responsibility, our relations with one another, our place in the universe. So even though they might have been antagonists in the 80s and throughout the decades since, I think they've got a lot to say to each other, and a lot of ways to have a really productive conversation.
Brian, I know you're a world traveler. You've lived overseas for extended periods of time, and I'm sure you've seen, in particular, Christianity and churches and in many different cultures. And maybe antagonistic is not the relationship between religion and horror, at least in some places. How would you characterize that kind of dynamic tension between horror and religion?
I think it's a very kind of interesting back and forth. I think it's less a kind of antagonism than it is a kind of circuit, and I think antagonism can be kind of involved in that circuit, especially because you can see tensions, as Brandon discusses in his book, between the church as a kind of organized structure and religion itself, and the way in which sometimes the church is suggesting certain things and religion is suggesting something else. And then the way in which that kind of ties into horror in different ways. So I find it a very complicated and complex relationship. And I'm glad that, that someone like Brandon acknowledges that in his books.
Yes, very much so. Gemma, any thoughts on how you would characterize it?
I was not brought up with any kind of religion. I came to any form of religion quite late in life, and even now I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I have an interest in worship. I'm not entirely sure that I have an interest in religion, an interest in prayer, an interest in getting together with people and singing and stuff like that. But and doing good stuff for other people, things like that. But so religion from the very beginning was presented to me as a set of mythology, along with a whole bunch of other mythologies. My original interests lay in archaeology, so I found the tension between a religion with one god and and a bunch of religions with sets of gods really interesting. But you get a little older and you realize that the world is so much driven by us looking around and going, oh man, the world is beautiful and it's so wonderful to be alive, but one day we won't be. And that tension to me is the tension that behind every religion. Mm-hmm. It's like, what made the world, what made us, what brought us to where we are, and when we cease to be who we are and where we are, where will we be? Where will we end up? Is there a place that we end up? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's like the central issue of life and the central issue of horror always. I said to somebody around the time that In That Endlessness Our End came out, they were like, well, how do you see the end of things? How do you see death? And I'm like, well, essentially, I think that we are orbiting a large hole in the middle of the universe, and we all know we're going in it. We have no idea what's in there. And I, in a strange way, I would be happy if I knew that I was just going to be distributed throughout the universe. I would be happy if I knew that I was just going to wink out. It's anything to do with eternity that really bothers me.
Yeah.
And
so obliteration is more comforting than the thought of.
Yes, in a strange way, obliteration is more comforting, and being distributed throughout the universe is a different type of obliteration, really. It's
obliteration of the self, but not obliteration of existence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I tend, I guess, to believe in the physics of things, and if energy cannot be created or destroyed, then it obviously has to simply be redistributed. That makes sense to me in the same way that love as a kind of force that makes things real and holds the universe together in the face of entropy makes sense to me, a little bit more than, a guy with a beard.
Yeah.
saying, no.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm a guy with a beard.
I understand. The guy with the beard saying, no, don't do that. It's like, put your dick back in your pants.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm going to have to.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. But yeah, there's that's what I love. When I was producing theater for about 9 years, several years back in the 20-teens, we took on plays that were really asking the big questions. That's the space I love, and that's where to me where horror and religion intersect very well. It's that they are unafraid. They're intent on asking the big questions that you can love horror or not, you can be religious or not, but most people are going to be asking the question, what will happen after I die?
Mm-hmm.
Will there be an I in any sense? If there is, in what sense is there, etc. And Brandon, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gemma.
I'm sorry. Just one more thing.
Please.
I remember when I was studying physics in high school, and one of the things that amazed me was that the smaller you got or the larger you got, you ended up in nothing. You ended up in a place which completely could not be quantified. And to me, that's the numinous. And that is the place where horror and religion intersect. Always in the numinous, always in the unquantifiable.
That's fascinating. And I love how you're tying like really metaphysics and cosmology together in your perspective on things. That's really fascinating. Brandon, in your book, Scared by the Bible, you write, I truly believe, as I think many of the biblical writers did, that if we understand what scares us, we also understand what's important to us. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah. I think fear, hope, and these ultimate questions of importance are all connected together. When we're afraid of things, we're having anxiety, fear, terror over either experiencing something that we don't want to happen or being denied something that we wish would happen. So all of those things are really, really linked together very closely. And I think horror is able to play with those things on a number of different levels. That's why slasher films are maybe about a guy with a knife, but they're also about our families and our authority structures and about our relationships with each other. And so that really deep dive into what are you afraid of, that really gets at what matters to you in life. What would devastate you more than anything if it was taken away? And what do you want to obtain more than anything? And what are you afraid of not getting to? Horror asks us to think about all those things and really helps serve as a way to kind of think through and reflect on those questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a clarifying element, I guess, to fear.
Yeah.
We feel as though it blows us completely out, but it also really forces us to go deep down. And the idea that you're a whole different person when you're scared doesn't have to be a bad idea. The idea that, I think when most people hear that phrase, they're like, oh yeah, because you're like a terrible person. You're gonna leave your kids behind to stay alive. You're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. And I'm like, no, actually, I think it's the other way around. I think you're far more likely to do terrible things when you're comfortable. People do that all the time.
Yeah.
I think our contemporary society plays that out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think too, there's something about fear bringing along a kind of destabilization with it. And that's something that kind of resets you in some ways and kind of unsettles you and then puts you in a position where you start to realize what is the first thing you grasp for? What do you try to hold on to? How do you climb out of that kind of destabilization? And yeah, I think often you learn things about yourself that you don't necessarily want to learn. And for me, some of the best horror movies and fiction is stuff that kind of does unsettle both the characters and myself in ways that make it much harder to kind of build back up again.
And I think if we're diving really deep into religion, this is what religion is supposed to do, is unsettle you enough to make you rethink things and really clarify what your values are. And then also just push the limits of your imagination so you can think about the world in new ways. One of the things I try to get at in Scared by the Bible is this idea that I think horror really tries to to help get us to a place where we can entertain ideas that we might reject from our rational minds. And that's really what religion does too, is say, let's take a step outside of your small life and try to imagine something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, the thing that you could imagine that is a little bit bigger can be as simple as going, oh, you know what? All that stuff that was really important yesterday, that was crap. that was just a bunch of bullshit. And in fact, it was always a bunch of bullshit, and we could have said that at any point
Mhm.
in the curve, and we can, but now we have a reason. We can just go, no. Women can work in a factory. It's like black guys can be in the army. It's like perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. It's like we gotta fight those Nazis or whatever. Those zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wonder if Gemma and Brian, if you can give us an example of how religion has helped your own horror fiction take shape. And
Mhm.
Brian, obviously, I know religion is for you more than just like a personal background material to mine for stories.
Mhm.
Topics like belief and authoritarianism
Mhm.
are pretty important threads within
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
fiction. I think about a story like Two Brothers, which is a
Mhm.
horrifying tale, right? And dealing with authoritarianism and kind of that lack of certainty and the destabilization that comes with a change in one's family structure and things like that. But give us an example of how you use or how religion has helped shape your horror fiction.
I mean, I feel like I was as probably most people know, I was raised Mormon. I'm an excommunicated Mormon now.
Mm.
I was pretty involved in the hierarchy of the church at one point. I was one of 3 people running a congregation of about 700, and so was pretty connected. Grew up reading both the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And then when I went to graduate school, I was really surprised when I took 18th century literature classes and people couldn't see the biblical allusions there because they just had no exposure to it. So it's something that's so kind of worked into how I was raised that, even though I'm no longer Mormon, I feel that those questions, the questions that religion raised for me, are things that I just keep on going back to. And for me, I think a lot of my work has been about trying to figure out how does one locate oneself after leaving a religion, where one still has a sense of the mystical and the numinous, and those things are still important to me. And I think, as Gemma suggested, it's like horror does do this thing where it's open in ways to the numinous and the mystical, in ways that are analogous to religion, even if the effect is different in some ways. So I guess I was thinking about this question because I knew I was going to do this podcast, and like literally the very first story I wrote, which I wrote in when I was a sophomore in high school, was a story in which Jesus retreats to a cabin in the woods, and God goes to see him to try to find out why he's left the world behind, and cannot talk him back into coming into the world. And obviously, that's not a story I've ever published. It won a prize in high school for reasons that are unclear to me. And but I feel like that impulse has always been there, and kind of the struggle with that. A lot of my stories are like Last Days is a story about an amputation cult, and kind of begins with a verse from the Bible and kind of goes from there. So I feel like that struggle for me is an ongoing struggle in terms of thinking about the relationship, those questions as something that horror can answer, something that religion also tries to answer, and then myself as someone who's very skeptical of authoritarianism and also of organized religion, but also still has a kind of commitment to the idea of the numinous and the yeah.
Awesome. Gemma, what about you?
So more and more as I get older, everything comes back to autism, the frame of autism. My son has a diagnosis. I do not have a diagnosis, but to be frank, part of my journey as the mother of my son has been going, oh, holy shit. It's like if people had been looking for girls with Asperger's around the time that things had been were the worst in my life, then potentially somebody might have said, instead of, for example, saying to my mother, your daughter might have early onset schizophrenia, which thankfully she did not accept as a diagnosis. Yeah. And autism is interesting because everything starts with the self and everything kind of revolves around the self. And in a lot of ways, what you realize very early on is that the outside world is kind of inexplicable to you in a lot of ways, but you certainly can study yourself and you can learn as much as you possibly can about yourself, why you do the things you do, why you feel the things you feel. And the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that in fact that applies to the outward world as well. I was thinking about why pride is a sin, for example, the other day. And I think it has a lot to do with the idea that you can love yourself too much, which is not necessarily what the Greeks were talking about when they were talking about self-love. They were talking about the difference between self-love and self-obsession. And from their point of view, the good part of self-love is self-acceptance, which has certainly, been very helpful to me. So when I was younger, I identified with monsters, just like Tio Guillermo, because I thought I was a monster. Everyone I knew, everyone I came across would have that there's something wrong with you kind of response.
Your story, Pair of Anguish, I think it was kind of reflected your emotional state as a
yes,
in school. It's a hard hitting story. It's hard to read. It's beautifully written, of course, but it's the main character is just such an outsider. She just seems so alone in that story.
And the funny part is that I am both of those girls.
Wow.
I am also the girl who's obsessed with witchcraft and the girl who ends up, anyways.
Yeah.
So yes, I was both of those girls. And yeah, so that I think is where, I began to think of, gods and God and saints and, people who have magical powers, people who get power from somewhere, but also in terms of monsters, in terms of monstrosity. And I was always attracted towards the trickster gods and the bad gods, and it's like Loki, for example, is I'm a big Loki person. Not a Loki girl, but a Loki person.
Nice.
And the older I've become, the more I realize that we are all monsters of one type or another. And my framing of everything as a way to understand myself and the relationships that I built around myself through the lens of monstrosity and the lens of godhood and the lens of, it's like overreach. And, most recently Frankenstein, I watch Frankenstein 2025 and I see it as a story of two neurodivergent people who, one of whom tries to build himself a friend and ends up with a child and goes, oh shit, you love me. What the hell is wrong with you? It's like, I'm not lovable. I'm not a good person. I cannot be that person for you. And then by the end, they've beaten each other into submission and realized that, in fact, you can be that person for the other person. So much of the story of religion is about power, or appears to be about power. But the older I get, the more I realize that the story of religion should be about love not just the love of God for humankind, but the love that God models, or the concept of God models for humankind.
Yeah.
The love that we can extend each other just fucking cuz. It's like it's like this is, it's like I again I was thinking about this week in the Advent calendar is the theme is love.
Mhm.
And I have to write prayers for the people for the church that I go to, where my son and I sing in the choir together. And I was thinking about how difficult it is to love other people when you've had a weekend like the weekend that we just had, when you have a school shooting and a Chthonica shooting, and Rob Reiner gets killed by his, Rob Reiner and his wife get killed by their son, and then the president of the United States decides that it's all about him. And it's like bang, 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 and then it's Tuesday, and you're like, we're probably going to be at war with Venezuela by Thursday.
Not a very an environment that's conducive to trust and openness and the things that you would want.
And I think the love in the subjective leads you to love in the objective. If you love your child, and why wouldn't you, then it's potentially possible that you could love other people, and it's potentially possible that other people could love you. So I choose to believe in love not just as a possibility, but as a probability. And if somebody says, why do you choose to believe that? My first impulse as a low-key person is to say, because fuck you, that's why.
I thought that might be your answer, actually,
right.
when you kicked off that question.
Yeah.
Gemma, I want to carry on with that theme of monsters for just a minute, because Brandon, in Scared by the Bible, you discuss monsters that are in the Bible, specifically the vision of Daniel 7 with the 4 beasts that rise from the sea, and you talk about thematically what really is that probably about, and these are royal figures, is about empire, the empires that the Jewish people at this time are living under, the second of 4 that they're living under, the oppression there, and you write about monsters. You write this: sometimes it's just cool to see something depicted that doesn't seem like it belongs in the world, as if suddenly the world has become a little more interesting than it was a few minutes ago because of this new possibility. But something else that almost always attaches itself to the monster is a message of some kind. Monsters show us things about ourselves, about the world, and about the society in which we live. Monsters are messages put into chaotic, sometimes terrifying motion. Now, of course, we think of angels as being messengers, or maybe a sentient message from the mouth of God himself. And certainly angels are plenty terrifying. Every time they show up, they're having to tell the humans they appear to, do not be afraid.
Calm down.
And I'd like for you to unpack what you mean about monsters as messages. And then, Gemma, I'd like to follow up with the prayer for the people you wrote back in October that you shared on social media, because in there you talked about monsters as warnings. I wonder if there's really something there: monsters as messages and monsters as warnings. Brandon, just unpack the monsters as messages a little bit for us.
Yeah. So the Latin monstrare is the same root that we get demonstrate from. Like, it literally means to show. So it could mean either to give a message or to give a warning. Like, those are very, very closely related. So I think when we look at the monsters throughout the Bible, you have the monsters of Daniel, you have the monsters of Revelation, also the monsters of Job, and lots of other monsters. Sometimes they destroy things and they smash and they have fights and all those things. But they also present a vision of, or they maybe ask us to think about, what in the world do we really want to protect? What is worth protecting? What are we willing to fight for? And what would we rather not? It's an opportunity for us to rethink, is this really the power structure that we literally want to go to war for? Or is there a better way to do this? And when we're faced with the monster, we can start thinking through those questions.
Yeah, the gigantic tyrant idea, the idea of a of a god king, right? The idea of a god king pope, you know, the idea of a church that is also a person, at its worst is like a gargantua. It is like a giant rampaging beast. It is like a kaiju. You know, it's like we're just gonna, you know, hope that Godzilla will sort shit out.
Yeah.
It's like, how likely is that? You know, we can't even communicate with Godzilla, for God's sakes. You know? And you know, even if we think of ourselves as I think cells in the body politic, cells in the body of empire. Well, any one of those cells could turn cancerous. Any one of those cells does not necessarily have to follow the impulses that go through that body from whatever the brain is, whatever we see is the brain. And, you know, I think more than anything else, what the idea of the monster demonstrates for me is that monstrosity, evil, the capacity for evil, the capacity for chaos, the capacity to work against yourself and everyone else. You know, I think it was Toni Morrison who said that evil was boring. And I'm not absolutely sure that I believe that, because otherwise it wouldn't be so attractive to people. But here's what I would say. We are all capable of any fucking thing at any fucking time. We can all find reasons to do bad things, to say, I'm human and the people that I love are human, but those people aren't human. And therefore you turn those people into monsters, but you make yourself their monster. And that's what I see when I look at things like what's happening in Gaza right now, which is so impossible for me to understand, particularly because you would think that the people who are doing that would know not to do that. But, you know, I mean, problem is. You know.
And I think you really get it at two of these fascinating sides of monstrosity. When we create monsters, we create the monster based on what we're afraid of, but also what we want to think we are not. Everything that we are not, that's the monster. But
That's
then buried within that is that we always fundamentally misunderstand ourselves. So rather than creating the monster of what we are not, we create the monster of what we wish we weren't. But where we actually do recognize some of ourselves in there, even if we try to deny that.
I mean, you know, when you boil down the whole anti-Semitism, the weaponized anti-Semitism thing, you know, it's like, oh yeah, these people hate us. They think we're rats. They think we're vermin. They think we're, you know, we're bugs. You know, they want to crush us like cockroaches. And I'm like, are you talking about them though? You know, I mean, the problem is that everyone has wanted to do that. Everyone has said that about every person on the earth, every different type of person. Tribalism is a hell of a drug. And genocide is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, monsters often are a kind of externalized version of the thing that we have inside of us that we don't want to acknowledge or admit. And I think that sometimes it's, if you say, that's not me, it's different from me, you think you can kind of turn away from it. But I do think, you know, that idea of something there that you have to acknowledge and that you have to kind of cope with is something that runs through a lot of horror. I do think there's something really interesting with a lot of contemporary, at least horror, that's on the page, which is that the notion of what the monster is or what it means to be monstrous is being reconsidered in a lot of ways. So it's not as much an us versus them. There's more kind of conscious identification that's going on there. There's more kind of, I don't know, almost celebration of the monster. But then also I think that there's, you know, this whole notion of monster's message, which I think is an important notion, I think there's also a lot of productive ambiguity where often you get these monsters that probably are a message, but you don't know what the message is.
Yeah.
And instead of like telling you, and for me, I mean, one of the things I love about Japanese Japanese horror movies is that often it's like you know, in an American horror movie, it's like you figure out what the ghost wants, you satisfy them, they rest, everything's okay.
Mhm.
Japanese movie, it's just like, no, the ghost is just mad. It's not
Forever.
nothing you can do. They're mad forever, and so you're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what do? Do we just leave the country?
Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, when you think about I read your chapter about the Ring, and Sinister, and when you think about it, I have always felt that the version of Samara that comes out of the well, the version of Sadako that comes out of the well, is not whatever Sadako or Samara was when she was alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's her moment of doubt and pain. It's her last moment amplified.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't, there's no, what can you do? It's like, there's no solving that.
Because the moment's already happened. So
the moment's
there,
already
and it just
happened.
keeps on echoing
So it's
and
just,
echoing. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a signal that keeps echoing and echoing and echoing. And, in the same way that with Kayako in The Grudge, it's like just seeing the house can screw you up. Just walking by the house, you didn't even know what happened in there.
Yeah.
It's like it just echoes and echoes and echoes. And I wonder whether, there's a bit of radiation in there. There's a bit of like, the impurity of something that has just been altered on a molecular level and cannot be, it cannot be turned back to what it was before.
But it is like also like a tape loop, which makes sense with some of the things that you talk about in that chapter. I mean, it's like this thing that just repeats and repeats. If you're lucky, it can degrade, but it's not going to ever change in a way.
No, exactly, exactly. And then with so that's the onryo, definitely. But with the yokai, you move into a completely different thing where it's just like, well, this is just completely inexplicable. It's like, it's not human. It's never been human. It will never be human. It's like, it's a woman with a broom for a head. It's a sword that turned into a guy, sort of.
Right. Or that head on the long neck.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, and it can be kind of funny, or it can be kind of horrifying, or it can be, it's like, but it's never, it's not you. It's never going to be like you.
Always freaky.
Yeah, always freaky. I teach a class on horror and fiction and film, and I just showed my class a few weeks ago House, the Japanese horror movie, which is like really strange.
I've heard it described as if Mario Bava directed an episode of Scooby-Doo.
That's about right. Yeah, that works.
Yeah, it's actually very much like that.
And it's like the thing that makes it work so well is it's like it's both very, very funny at moments and then just totally inexplicable at others. And then there's a few moments where it is actually genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
And that kind of, And it's the kind of movement that you go through as a viewer where you kind of go from, it's like you're on a roller coaster from like, a point where you're frightened to a point where you're laughing and back and forth.
Yeah,
it becomes like
Yeah. What's that? Sorry?
Yeah.
It becomes like conceptual horror.
Right. Conceptual horror. Yeah.
But that seems to fit in with how you mentioned the monster is kind of increasingly an ambiguous figure. And I thought that really connected with Gemma talking about the monster as not necessarily being evil, but being chaotic. That chaotic is really ambiguous. And I think we're at a point in culture when we're ready for some chaos.
Well, I think
that maybe some of the systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that we're seeing more and more is that, I mean, when I first started out, it was the 90s. And, we're coming off the tail of the 80s horror boom. And it's suddenly like down into the well, down into the hole. It's like nobody gives a shit about horror anymore. Horror is just like, crap. But better, and either it's sort of Gorno, or it's or you don't even know what it's like. And a lot of it was sort of like, we were coming out of a period of extremely popular horror, popular and to some degree populist horror, where it's like, you know, the nice little town, something from the outside comes in and we array ourselves against it and we repel it, and it's a very
and it only takes 500 pages to repel
yeah, exactly.
it,
And it's a very pleasant kind of, you know, I mean, I'm pissing on Stephen King to say that his stuff kind of kicked that off, because King's stuff is not like that at all. But I think it's a dumb person's idea of what a Kingian, you know, kind of story is.
Good description.
Yeah. And, you know, but in the 90s, there was this real feeling that you were trying to catch a hold of that populism again. And so keep yourself out of everything. Keep yourself out of, you know, it's like the more specific you become about yourself, the less generalized you can possibly be. And therefore, the fewer people are going to identify with your horror, with your story. They're not going to be interested in it because it's not white enough, it's not straight enough, it's not male enough, it's not whatever enough, it's not blah, blah, blah. And me being me, I can't do that. You know, so I was just like, you know what, I'm going to write what I want to write because fuck you, that's why. And you know, and again, I really was surprised that over a 20-year period that people, you know, found me and kept with me and were like, no, I like that. You know, I like the fact that everybody's queer. I like the fact that everybody's weird. I like the fact that, you know, the monsters are the main characters. I like the fact that, you know, people are very screwed up. I like the fact that, you know, a lot of this is about, man, I'm a monster, but am I? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not absolutely, I mean, what is it? I am obscene to you, but to myself, I simply am. You know, it's like Victor.
Nice.
And you're not so great either, by the way.
Yes.
With your fucking gloves and your milk and your mommy issues.
The milk and mommy issues, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it kind of along those same lines, Brandon, you I love how in I think in particular was Scared by the Bible, you show how you know, within the Bible you've got a number of stories that you could fit into subgenres of what we think of as contemporary subgenres of horror. Of course, possession and exorcism, you know, you could have retitled the Gospel of Mark Jesus Christ Exorcist, because that's a lot of what he does is perform exorcisms.
Yeah, that's true.
And apocalyptic horror, of course, and monsters and folk horror. You actually identified like the Book of Judges as being like you're representative of what we would call folk horror today. And you made a very interesting connection that I hadn't really made before. Gemma, I know you, and Brian, I'm sure you are as well. But Gemma, I know you're a big folk horror fan and a fan of The Wicker Man. But showing kind of the connection between The Wicker Man and the story of Samson, and how the guys we ought to be rooting for, that we ought to identify as good guys, maybe really aren't all that good. With Samson, it's pretty obvious, but even with Sergeant Howie, can you talk a little bit about that? You know, the story of Samson and The Wicker Man, and what it kind of how it makes us reassess where we, the supposedly good people, are really coming from.
Yeah, I see folk horror as being primarily about this supposed binary opposition between contemporary society and some past idyllic, less idyllic society, and that binary opposition by the end of the film has really broken down. That we're realizing that we can't locate goodness or heroism or virtue in either one of those places. I mean, I see something similar happen in the Book of Judges. That this is it's written really almost like folk stories, that these are stories from Israel's past. They're written as if not contemporary history, but a long time ago. And then gradually throughout that book, you see this kind of breakdown of the whole society. And people becoming less and less heroic. I remember being taught about Samson like he was, some kind of religious Hercules or something like that in Sunday school class. Yeah, he took down the pillars and smashed all the Philistines, and yay, Samson. But I think when you really read the story, he's a petulant brat. The spirit of the Lord comes upon him, but all he does with it is settle his own little grievances and run around chasing after women.
He does everything a Nazirite is not actually supposed to do. Touch dead bodies.
Exactly.
Wine. Yes.
He's called the judge, but he doesn't do, which is, the leader of this kind of tribal federation. And he doesn't do anything that looks like he's a leader. He's a worthless guy. And his demise, rather than being heroic, I think is just this kind of tragic result of his inability to look at anybody outside of himself. So I see this the same kind of thing, that we're destabilizing the question of who really is the hero in this story. I don't think it's really Samson. And I think that pushes us as readers to look at that in a really different kind of way. I think often as contemporary people of faith, we come to that story and assume that the main character must be a hero and this must be behavior to emulate. Because that's how we've been taught the Bible works. And
do you think there is a hero in that story or not? The story of Samson?
I don't. Yeah. We pretty soon after Samson, there's this refrain that comes in the book of Judges that in that time there was no king over Israel, so every man did what was right in his own eyes. And that's when we get to this. Judges 19 is probably the most, which is right after the Samson story, probably the most horrifying story in the whole Bible. Really nasty rape and dismemberment and just terrible stuff.
Right.
And this is the idea is that this is what happens when you have a society that is completely lawless and really just looking after your own self-interest.
So I think one thing I really so I grew up reading the Bible, and I think immediately when you start reading the Bible, and you talk about starting reading when you're 10, you very quickly realize that it's not what everybody is telling you it is. It's like
this is not the book weird. I thought I was going to be reading.
Exactly. But then you realize, it's way better than the book I thought I was going to be reading. So.
If you open your mind up to it's not, it doesn't have that really narrow focus on. No, it has. It's just going to teach me what I'm supposed to do.
It's an intense moral complexity to it, and I think that's really interesting. And the way that gets simplified by almost every religion I can think of. I
think so.
Yeah, this idea that I think a lot about the idea of moral deformity. That we can all conceptualize anything, but are we going to do it? The minute that we allow ourselves to do it, I really feel that when you do something that is morally deforming, you feel it. And I've done some bad stuff in my life, for God's sakes. I think everybody's done some really bad stuff. I've killed animals. I've treated people badly. I slapped my son in the face once, it's like, but every time I've done that, I have felt it. And I think to some degree that I feel very grateful that at no point in my life have I felt that I was a good person. Have I felt that I was like, it's like, I'm fine. I can, it's like just doing shit. It's like, it's fine. I'm a good person. It's like, no, I've always felt that I was potentially a bad person, holding myself back from doing things that came into my mind, holding myself back from the first thing that comes into my mind, which is usually not great. Certainly when I was younger and when I was angry all the time. And, and I thought I hated everyone. And it took me a long time to figure out that I was actually afraid of everyone because everyone around me was so inexplicable and unpredictable. And, and you just felt like you had to lie all the time, and that people were lying to you all the time. And there's a certain, as you get older, you kind of have to relax into the idea that we're all fallible, and that we all have our something going on, and we don't know what's going on in somebody else's life. But I feel like the worst things that people do come from a place of feeling as though they're a good person. It's like, I'm a good person, so I get to do this.
Yeah.
I'm a good person, so I get to do bad to this person who is bad.
I feel terrible for very wealthy people, very wealthy, very powerful people, because who's there telling them, don't do that, you idiot? No, that hurts my feeling.
Nobody's
apparently. You put that on X, people are going to laugh at you or whatever. Or no, that's terribly insensitive. Like, there's no one, people who are just, very, very powerful, very wealthy have.
I mean, at least Caesar had somebody standing next to him saying, "Remember, you will die."
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I do think people do this thing where they don't look at their actions so much, and they end up just deciding that they're a certain kind of person. There's not an equation between what they're actually doing and how they think of themselves. And like simple example of this, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we always judge ourselves by our intentions and other people by their actions.
Exactly.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but we had, for instance, two neighbors, elderly neighbors next to us, churchgoers, who at a certain point decided to paint the side of our house because they didn't like of our house.
Okay.
And we were like, why did you paint the side of our house? And they were like, because we had to look at it more than you did. And so we felt like it was the right thing to do. And we're like, that's not actually the right thing to do. And we had to work for months to compel them to change this and get it back to what it was. And the whole time they were like, we did this for you. We did it. It was perfect, so on and so forth. And it's just like, at a certain point, you're like,
we did it all for you.
There's such
It
a
was for
disconnect
you.
between your actions and how you see yourself, that it's like, eventually we realize there's nothing we can do to convince them it's not good to paint the side of your neighbor's house.
Why are you so ungrateful, Brian?
Exactly. I know. I'm terrible that way. So, and meanwhile, he's like volunteering at a soup kitchen, and you're like, okay, well, that's good. I'm glad you're doing that, but don't paint other people's houses.
And you're like, in a way, this is a very small thing, and in another way, it's like
right. It's indicative of a much larger thing, and I think that's the thing, is that people, we're very good at self-justifying in a way that allows us to think well of ourselves and still be terrible. And so, in fact, Gemma, I think the thing that you're talking about, where you feel like you're holding back from doing something that is awful, that's not typical, in that so many people don't have that, self-knowledge in a way. And it's important to have that.
And I can thank my neurology for that. I can thank I can thank the way that I was born to think for that. And I think for other people, it's something that you have to learn.
Right.
you have to go, no.
Right.
Don't do the first thing that comes in your mind. Actually, I remember explaining that to somebody as the most important thing that I had learned growing up was your first impulse.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Or think it through before you do it, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always going to be wrong. And the people around you will always think it's wrong, even if it's not. So just think about it.
Right.
I think that neighbors painting your house is probably a perfect segue to talk about possession horror and exorcism.
Yeah.
So
well done.
Very nice.
I don't think a horror film has ever equaled quite the impact of William Friedkin's The Exorcist, where people are genuinely afraid to watch it in theaters, as if something might attach itself to them and go home with them. And figures as lofty as Billy Graham and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops warned people against seeing the film. But Brandon, which is interesting, because Brandon, in Scared by the Bible, you write, In many ways, exorcism films are the most conservative of horror genres. They not only posit that the power of the church is all that can keep evil at bay, but that evil is able to shoehorn its way into our lives through the cracks in our family relationships. So I gotta say, Focus on the Family should have been championing The Exorcist.
I think so.
I read a
I think
book,
they should have loved.
Absolutely. I read a book called American Exorcism, which is really fascinating. I mean, it's a sociological study of exorcisms in the U.S. and then globally. But since 1973, the demand for exorcisms, I know that people are leaving the church in droves, but the demand for exorcism has only grown globally since 1973. You see it go up and up and up, and then the form of exorcism has certainly changed from like the Catholic high church exorcism, where it's like a bishop has to, there has to be a psychological study done of the person who thinks or whose family thinks they're possessed. And like they really do the psychological workups and stuff. And a bishop has to be involved in giving in getting permission for that to take place, etc. And it's gone from that to like what you might see in like charismatic Pentecostal circles, where it really is just like part of a regular church service experience, and you'll do mass exorcisms of people. It's fascinating how it tracks it. But yeah, you'd think that I don't know. The Exorcist really got a lot of people interested in thinking maybe that's what's wrong with my teenager. Let's go talk to the priest we haven't seen in a long time. Now, I will say you criticize you criticize The Exorcist for, in particular, having a girl and her mom have to wait in peril while the male authority figure kind of gets his act together and shores up his faith so that he can then come in and rescue her, which is insightful. I hadn't thought about that. I would love to know, like, what from all three of you, like, what's your favorite possession horror film, exorcism or not? What would be your favorite possession horror film? Brian, let's start with you. And Brandon, I know you mentioned a couple in your book that you might want to bring up. Do you have a favorite possession horror film?
Well, so it's very hard to beat The Exorcist. I was, I think, 7 when that came out in theaters, and so I just heard about it all the time, and I was totally fucking terrified of it just from what I'd heard about it, and I watched it when I was too young, probably when I was 14 or 15, and it terrified me. It was really intense. But there's lots of great possession films. There's a Japanese one called Pulse that I love, which is where people being kind of possessed by Kurosawa, Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Yeah, that one's really great. I thought When Evil Lurks, which came out a year or two ago, was also really good. And with the stuff with the dog in that is like totally terrifying.
Oh yeah, the whole thing, start to finish, horrifying.
Yeah. I don't know what else. I mean, I when I was younger, I saw Fallen when it came into the theater, and I enjoyed that quite a bit at the time. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, but it didn't scare me necessarily, but it was just like, oh, this is kind of fun. It ends on a kind of jaunty note. I like that. So.
Well, yeah, when you realize who you've actually been hearing the story from.
Exactly.
It's very clever. And it's Denzel.
I don't know why the demon is talking in Denzel Washington's voice. But
I mean, that's a good question. But yeah.
If I got into Denzel, I would stay in there.
That's right. Totally. Yeah.
Gemma, how about you? Favorite possession movie?
Okay, so 2 things about possession horror. And the first one is that to me, the really terrifying thing about possession horror is not necessarily the idea of something getting inside you. It's the idea that God allows something to get inside you to prove a fucking point. Which I think is horrifying. And it's really mean. And I mean, the good part is that anything you do while you're possessed, you didn't really do. So
it's written off. Yeah,
it gets written off. But it is kind of like it reminds me of Job, which again, it's sort of like, I'm just going to torture you for a while. I'm going to allow the devil to torture you for a while. I'm sure you're going to be fine. You'll
figure it out.
You'll figure it out. It's like you'll stand up under it. Well, yeah, but what about my animals, and what about my kids, and what about my it's like, there was a lot of damage that got done.
Right, right.
You know?
But he got double back, right? I mean, that's how it ends up. So
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
that's
more
lovely.
kids.
Yeah, too bad about those. Too bad
Yeah.
about those other kids.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that. But
Yes.
secondarily, what's interesting to me about the use of, I guess, exorcist terminology or possession terminology in terms of Pentecostals in particular is the way that anything that you don't like about another person is characterized as demonic.
Yeah.
You know, y'all white women demonic, you know, or y'all black women demonic, or y'all gay people demonic, or y'all whatever, you know, and you're just like, yeah, it's like, yes, you've been possessed by a demon of transgenderism. Like, I'm not entirely sure that is a
that
thing.
whole deprogramming thing is
no, exactly. And so what you're left with is this kind of interesting thing that you get in a lot of other cultures, where it's like, it's sort of like you had exorcism and possession instead of psychology. You know, it's like, this person got so depressed and they were depressed for like 3 years and nothing seemed to get any better. So the best thing that we could think to tell them is that there's a demon inside of them and we're going to remove it now. You know, it's like just a buildup of stuff, just a buildup of bad stuff. But the good part is I can open up a hole in the, you know, in the crown of your head, and out it comes like a, you know, like a pustule. So as a result, I've become really interested in looking at exorcism movies from other cultures, and The Medium. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this. Is a movie from Thailand. Basically it was put together and produced by the same guy who did The Wailing, that Korean movie. So The Wailing is a Korean possession movie. And it's also very much a movie about faith, and a movie about Christianity in a strange way, because the guy who made it is Christian and is kind of interrogating his own faith. And you know, so it's very much about, if you believe that someone is evil, then they're evil. And if you believe that someone is good, then they're potentially good. But maybe nobody's evil, and maybe nobody's good, and maybe there's just power moving around. Anyways, The Medium is a really interesting example of that, because okay, so the main character is a woman who is she is a woman who channels. She's a shaman, and she channels the spirit of a goddess called Bayan. And as a result, she's able to help people, but she helps people very much in a psychological kind of way. You know, it's sort of like, oh, so you're feeling bad because you drank that because you drank a whole thing of wine with a snake in it. Well, yes, probably the snake was very upset about that. So Bayan will help me remove the snake spirit from you, and you know, now you should go home and probably just not do that again. And there's this real feeling, because it's an animistic society, that it's not so much evil, but again, chaos. You know, that you can get that the spirits of animals, and the spirits of insects, and the spirits of grass, and the spirits of, like, you know, plants, the spirits of like a place can just get inside of you and build up and build up and build up until something needs to be done. But then there's also karma, and her she became the shaman of Bayan because her elder sister did not want to become the shaman of Bayan. And so when a person is about to become the shaman after like the previous shaman has died. They develop a thing that they call shaman sickness, and they started having like intense menstrual pain, horrible bleeding, you know, and it's really obvious that this is going to happen. So this started to happen to her older sister, and her older sister decided to deal with it by becoming a Christian. By converting. It's like, I'll become a Baptist, and you know, at that point it'll devolve onto my little sister.
Wow.
And indeed, you know, it's like, and the little sister is fine with it. The little sister is like, I like it. I like being the, you know, the shaman of Bayan. But then later, when her niece, the daughter of her sister who rejected Bayan, develops shaman sickness, she tries to exorcise her, and she tries to, you know, first through the church and then through another shaman, you know, and she tries to, you know, get around it, and then eventually turns to her sister. And by that time, it's too late. By that time, it's sort of like she's made the hole too big, and you can't plug it. And it backspills on her sister, and on Bayan, and on everything. And it's almost like the backspill of this terrible karma that she married into infects the goddess in an animistic kind of way. And therefore, by the end, when her niece is horribly possessed and just an absolutely monstrous, ferocious creature, you know, turning everything around her into chaos and awfulness. You know, she says, "Who are you? Who are you?" And she says, "I'm Bayan. I'm Bayan." You know, it's like,
and that's called it's called The Medium.
The Medium, yes.
The Medium. Okay.
Yeah, it's an amazing film.
That's going on my watch list, but I needed to watch The Wailing for a long time, and I haven't seen it yet. So
I would watch The Wailing first, and then watch that one.
Okay, and that's, to me, is so interesting, because in the U.S., I don't think you would have the basic religious, moral, metaphysical framework. You wouldn't have competing ones. No. It's just like the good or evil within a Christian frame, or a Jewish one, like in the Vigil, a favorite kind of a possession, exorcism, haunting film of mine. But Brandon, I mean, you mentioned a couple of exorcism films in your book that and I was a little surprised, because they're ones that got pretty mixed reviews critically, and yet you really bring out some interesting points. You want to mention either or both of them?
Oh, sure. So I remember in Lurking Under the Surface, I talked quite a bit about The Last Exorcism, which I enjoyed so much for the charismatic huckster preacher main character. I thought he was just all kinds of fun.
He's kind of a Marjo sort of character, I think. Yeah.
Marjo Gordner.
Yeah.
And the story still follows the banana pudding recipe in the middle. You know, he shows
that is
how, and then you can put the pudding together, and then you can.
They're not even. I can get away with anything.
Yes.
Yeah. That's, and then
let me tell you how to make banana bread.
That scene is just fantastic, and the movie still has the problem of the young girl who's being possessed, who isn't. The story isn't really about her at all. It's really about the pastor. So there is that.
Have you ever seen?
I feel like one of
The
my
Last Exorcism 2? The sequel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where it is more, it is really about her in that.
Yeah, which I really like. That was one of the things that I kind of folded into the whole idea of Little Horn, which is my meditation on Antichrist.
Yeah. Good call. Your conversation about competing worldviews, the only thing it made me think of was the recent reboot of The Exorcist that culminates in that kind of like almost interfaith exorcism, where you've got all these different religious experts coming together to kind of like do a Fantastic Four exorcism kind of a thing or something.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. I couldn't finish it. It just didn't it just wasn't scary. It didn't go anywhere for me.
It's not great. No, but
they were.
that was still interesting at the end, at least.
The Exorcist TV series was, to me, really, really
Yes.
terrific. Both seasons of it. The first one
Yes.
really surprised me because of how well it tied into the Exorcist 1973 film. But the second season too was just beautiful, really wonderful, and you get some good. You talk a lot about kind of in the conservative nature of these like early exorcism films, like The Exorcist. It is so much about like the threat to the family, and like the TV series of The Exorcist. Really, both seasons are very much about that. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but M. Scott Peck, the author of The Road Less Traveled, pop psychologist from the late 70s into the 80s, who sold millions and millions of copies as a guy who kind of brought pop psychology and personal spirituality together in a way, kind of shocked people when he started describing in his book People of the Lie. He's trying to describe from an MD, right? He's an MD, he's a psychiatrist. He's trying to describe what evil really is about, and he describes participating in 2 exorcisms, and then in his book Glimpses of the Devil, the whole thing is about exorcisms, and he was friends with Malachi Martin, and who's one of the Warrens associates, and Malachi is a very controversial figure again, like is he for real, is he a huckster, whatever. But M. Scott Peck, really, like, this guy has an international reputation, sold millions of copies of his book The Road Less Traveled, and then he writes a book, more than a book, on performing and leading in exorcisms.
There's something really, if you look at the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual for the Psychiatric Association, they'll do this thing where they describe different mental illnesses, and then there's a caveat, which is we understand that there are cultures in which these are not considered to be illnesses, and that it's part of religious belief or subcultures. And so there is this funny kind of hole in that, where it's like, how do you, there's kind of acknowledgement that there's like religion and psychiatry, and maybe they don't always cross in some way, or maybe it's like there's certain things that you just can't deal with one or the other.
There's this tension, I think, in a possession narrative always, between what are the things that could be you and what are the things that you feel cannot be you, cannot possibly be you. The things that come from the outside, the almost Cthulhuan kind of, almost Lovecraftian kind of things from outside space and time, from, it's like, this is just too much. How can I how can I hold this inside of me? How can this have anything to do with me? And, again, the problem is that I feel like, most things have something to do with you. It's like, interestingly, there's a case in Malachi Martin's book,
Hostage to the Devil.
To the Devil, which begins with a woman who basically tries to hold 2 ideas in her head at the same time. She becomes like very obsessed with the idea of absolute equity, where you can be evil and good at the same time, where you can be, something can be a smile and a leer at the same time. And it's almost like trying to do that makes her blow herself open, and she deforms herself in that particular way, so that what she becomes is possibly either she invites a demon in or she becomes a demon, but one way or the other. I mean, that's, it's like, you can do that to yourself, but then if somebody offers you a way out, if somebody offers you a way to, it's like, it offers you ECT, offers you drugs, offers you, talk therapy, offers you an exorcism, you might as well take it, because it's
just looking for a way forward.
In order to get a way forward, because that's you can't live like that.
Right.
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 Now,
I want recently.
No, go ahead.
I was going to lift up another possession movie recently that really grabbed me, which was the Taking of Deborah Logan.
Oh yeah.
And that really does connect with these ideas of trying to hold onto the self, because it's connected with a woman experiencing cognitive decline, where this issue of holding on to who you are is front and center. So rather than being associated with like the onset of puberty, which is all about, gets represented as male fears of a girl becoming a woman, we have really a deep exploration of the fear of holding on to the self and what it means if you're no longer yourself.
And it's and also the thing that I find interesting about that is that you can believe that guy transfers into her and then transfers into somebody else, but you can also believe that in her wish to hold on to herself, the only thing she can remember about probably the most, to some degree, moral, but also moral deformity kind of thing that she ever did, is that there was this guy, and that must be me. Because I can't remember anything about myself anymore. There was this evil guy that wanted to do this particular evil thing, and I must be that person. So
it's interesting what people grab onto in those situations. I had, when I was growing up, we had a friend of mine whose grandfather lived downstairs in their house, and he had kind of his own private apartment. But he watched Tarzan, Lord Greystoke, and he became convinced that my two friends who lived in the house were in that movie, and that was the thing he would hold on to. He'd talk about it and talk about he saw Bill defeating the apes and how strong he was, and just and that was the thing that kept him going for a long time. When he couldn't remember his name, he couldn't remember a lot about what was going on.
Wow, that's rough. Hey, I want to do a quick time check. I know we're at an hour and 16 minutes. I want to be obviously respectful of everyone's time. I'd love to tackle one more topic and then ask, hey, everyone, tell me your favorite blah. Do we think we could go another 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that okay?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks for the check, though, Greg. Appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Thing is, like, I've done these calls and like I'll let it go for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'm like, the conversation's still going. I'm trying to be cognizant,
and we want to be kind to our listeners as well.
I know it. Okay. Gemma, you said the L word, Lovecraft, and so we're going to go for it now. We're going to talk about cosmic horror in the Bible. And I love that, Brandon, in your book Scared by the Bible, you bring the story of Uzzah to us, which is certainly by anyone's measure very distressing story. Recap for us. Tell us about poor Uzzah from 2 Samuel chapter 6.
Sure. So 2 Samuel chapter 6 is when David has just assumed the kingship of Israel. They're having a procession with the ark into Jerusalem. The idea is it's going to be ensconced in David's palace. And during this procession, it starts to wobble, and the priest Uzzah reaches up to steady it so it doesn't fall over. And he's struck dead instantly because he touched the ark. And what's fascinating to me is
you don't touch the ark. That's clear. Everyone knows that.
They know that, but he was just trying to help out, right? He didn't want it to crash on the ground. And what I love about the story is that David's pissed. Like, David recognizes that God did this and that Uzzah didn't. It's technically a violation, but really he was trying to help out. So not only does David express anger at God, but then he's like, that ark's not going in my palace. That thing nowhere near me. So we find somewhere else to put the ark until the temple can get built.
Yes. I love the line how you describe it in Scared by the Bible. David's response indicates that he isn't just upset over it's Uzzah. I've always said Uzzah.
I think
Who
Uzzah,
knows?
But yeah.
Uzzah. He isn't just upset over Uzzah's death or frustrated with disagreement over God's choice. Instead, David seems to understand that this incident means that God is a different kind of God than David thought God was. And that to me, okay, no, that's scary. What if, like, I've grown up in the Christian tradition, kind of an offshoot, I grew up in a fundamentalist offshoot of Protestantism, and like, things like questioning the belief system of our fellowship was really verboten. You really can't ask a lot of questions about it. And if the Bible says it, it's true. And there's very, very literal interpretations, etc. But especially certainly like you don't question the love and the goodness of God. You certainly would not do that.
Yeah.
And then you get to this kind of a passage, and it's pretty distressing. You're having to start doing some moral gymnastics to say, well, like, the guy really should not have done that, or he knew better than to do. And you're just trying to do. I mean, you use the word theodicy in here. You're trying to come up with the justifications for why God can be good and not only have allowed bad things to happen, but actually did this thing according to this text.
Yeah.
And of course, you can start questioning the text or whatever. That's these are folk tales or whatever.
Sure.
You certainly can do that, but it does present a very frightening picture of God, and it kind of makes to me that gets into the cosmic horror space. And you even go on to I think just describe that like with Lovecraft and like his kind of deific monsters that are out there. Like the best thing is like they don't care about us, and that's like the best thing is like they don't know us as long as they don't observe us.
Yeah.
Good, we're probably safe from them. But
oh God,
here,
please pass me by. Oh God, please don't take any notice of me. Larry Cohen said that about Hugh the Winged Serpent, that was the kind of God that you would pray that to, don't take any notice of me, because if you do, then obviously something terrible is going to happen. I find interesting the idea that, I mean, what we're dealing with in the Bible, obviously, from my point of view, is a collation of narratives, right?
Yeah.
And it's really kind of impossible to justify saying, no, the whole Bible is written by the same person, and it all makes sense.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all, so I look at something like that and I go, well, yeah, because God was like that then,
he was angry back then.
Yeah,
he got nicer as he got older.
God was the God that said, man, you guys are just not good enough to strangers. Crack a boom. It's like, and also don't look back. I told you not to look back. Crack a boom! You're turned into a pillow of salt. It's like it's
you have to get the right translation to have that crack a boom actually on the page. But
I think that's from the actual Hebrew. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or the flood. I mean, my Lord. Come on.
Yeah, and the idea of God being a jealous God. I mean, there's lots of. It's really hard to kind of look at all the kinds of things that are said about God, and first of all, make sense that it's all talking about the same person.
Yeah.
And then second of all, think is this really someone that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the weirder things that I married into the Catholic Church in that my husband is a Catholic. We were married by his father was a deacon. We were married by his uncle, who is a Basilian monk. So I am fairly, conversant with Catholicism at this point and their ideas. And one of the weirder things is having to, sometimes I'll talk to my husband and I'm just like, okay, but so obviously God changed. And he's like, no, God doesn't change. And it's like, that's
right,
the point. That's why we have three. That's why there are three gods. That's why there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's like the Holy Spirit doesn't change, and the Father doesn't really change. The Son, I guess, is where God sort of changed, but he didn't really change. He just kind of, and I'm like, so what? He just butted a part of himself off, and made a flesh golem and stuck him inside of a human woman, so that he could. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense to me, I suppose. If you're going to do that, sort of like a demon possessing a person, so that they can be inside of space and time and flesh, and have fun, and he's like, no, that's not. No, Gemma, Jesus, what is wrong with you? Don't do that. But yeah, this idea that God can't change, but the narrative of the Bible, the way that we see it, is that God does change. God
That God
changes from this jealous God and this angry God and this this desert God who has one person, one people and one place that he looks after, to one, it's like one tribe made of several tribes, to the God that allows himself to be born into the world and suffer and die as a human being.
But I want to be careful to make sure we don't bifurcate it into the evil, bad, mean God of the Old Testament and the nice God of the New Testament.
No, not at
because
all. Not at all.
I know
because they're both
trying
bad.
to do, but
No.
well, I mean, the New Testament ends with the book of Revelation, where a bunch of people get thrown into the lake of fire, right? I mean, we've got plenty of wrath and anger in the New Testament too. I think the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is this idea that God's primary characteristic is goodness is really a pretty modern invention and pretty Western invention. I think for most of the history of God, so to speak, the primary characteristic would be power.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And that's completely consistent with all of God's character throughout the Bible. Sometimes it's expressed in love, sometimes expressed in wrath, but it's always about power.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does make me think. I mean, you bring up the point here with having to kind of hold these the idea of I think it's Psalm 8 that you quote or that you reference, where we are created by God. Humans are created by God just a little lower than the angels. We're like the epitome of creation. We are, as the Genesis story tells us, not just good, but very good, and given dominion, given stewardship over all of creation. At the same time, at kind of a little bit more on the Lovecraft side, we can also see that we are insignificant. I mean, we're like so tiny compared to the vastness of creation, or simply the vastness of the creator. And somehow we're having to hold both of these ideas in our hands at the same time. And that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance, can be where do you go with that? What do you live with? And it makes me wonder if sort of the I guess within like maybe Christian theology, the Lovecraftian analog to that would be the deific heights. If you look at this God who is, the Epistle of John says God is love. It's like to me, I always read that as a metaphysical statement. This is the character. This is the warp and weave, the weft of God Himself, which is love. And then also, like the wrath and then maybe He's so high up there that the heights of God's nature, maybe you wouldn't be able to really tell a difference between good and bad, or love and wrath, and mercy versus vengeance, etc. Maybe that's kind of the cosmic horror of it. Is it cosmic horror? Is it cosmic splendor? I
There's
don't
a
know
great
that I'd really be able to tell.
There's a great story by M. John Harrison, which is called Settling the World, where God comes down to earth, and it's just not at all what people think it's going to be. And then they're still kind of trying to figure out how to think about it and justify it, even as something just inexplicable is happening and going on.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for something to be that big and that diffuse and that spread out, that every part of creation is the creator. That's completely impossible to understand. I think go on.
I think that's the final message of the book of Job, as close as the book of Job gets to giving us a message, is that Job, you're trying to make it all about you, but then God takes Job on a tour of the rest of the world. At one point, God tells Job, look, rain falls on a land where no one lives. It's not all about people. And then this tour ends with Leviathan, the amazing chaos monster that is terrifying, that could destroy the world, and that God also thinks is awesome enough that God's going to spend an entire chapter describing Leviathan and talking about how cool
Mhm.
Leviathan is.
Yeah, yeah,
That's right. I made
yeah.
this.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
made this.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's I mean, it's yeah. Where were you when I made the world? Declare
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
thou hast knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So,
You weren't around, were
Mormon
you?
theology
Yeah.
kind of goes into a weird space with this because the belief that Mormons is that as man now is, God once was. So the notion that you can kind of move
Yeah.
hierarchically up the chain, which I've always had a hard time kind of equating with, if God is all powerful and unknowable and so on and so forth, those two things just don't really mesh quite.
Yeah,
So,
that's getting into a Prometheus kind of
yeah,
moment
yeah.
there.
Or process theology, maybe. Yeah.
yeah.
I like
But
it.
now,
Yes.
Yeah.
this has been so much fun, and I again want to be respectful of everyone's time and start to wrap this up. But thank you for the comments and the thoughts and the ideas, and for Brandon for letting us kind of bring your two books in for this
Thank you so
wonderful
much.
conversation. I just so
Mhm.
enjoyed this. I would like to
Thank
ask
you.
as the last question: what is the scariest idea or doctrine or dogma that you know of from a major religion?
Hmm.
Gemma, do you want to start?
Well, I mean, it's easy to say hell. It's the glass mountain worn away with the sparrow's beak, and that being the first second of eternity in hell. But actually, no. I think the worst the worst vision of Christian theology that I've ever seen is The Rapture by Michael Tolkien, which ends with, our main character basically saying, I cannot forgive God for allowing my child to die, and therefore I'm going to stay out in the dark, in the outer darkness, outside the city of God for eternity, and that is my choice. And that's the only choice that I can reconcile myself with. I own that film. I haven't watched it for a very long time, but I own it because I think it's worth owning. Yeah, there's something about that. As I said, the general sense that it's like, why do I have to forgive God?
Yeah.
It's like, why
Yeah.
do I have to forgive God?
Right. There's some form of morality.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
that's
you
above.
made me the way I am. You made
Right.
me valuable. I am not the pot. I am not the potter. I am the potter's clay.
Yeah.
You know
Mm.
what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of.
Mm.
So
Wow.
yes.
That's awesome. Thank you, Gemma. Brian, how about you?
I mean, I think outer darkness is terrifying. In Mormon theology, the thing that I find really terrifying, that I have a book, The Open Curtain, which is partly about this, is the notion of blood sacrifice. And the idea in Mormon culture is that there's certain crimes or certain sins that are too great and that Christ's blood cannot atone for them. And so the only way you can atone for them is you can atone for them, but the way you can kind of limit the punishment you're going to face after your death is by killing yourself. And so that as a notion is like super terrifying. And also, like, I mean, it's the thing that I also find really terrifying. It is, I this is not something they teach you in Sunday school when you're Mormon. It's something you discover later on. The idea that there are things, that Christ's sacrifice was not enough,
Yeah.
just really impacts the way you think about religion and deity. And so that for me is something I've been obsessed with for a long time, and also maybe it was one of the things that kind of got me on my path out of Mormonism.
Wow, that's rough. Thank you. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, my mind also goes back to the crucifixion. For me, the requirement of God to demand a sacrifice and demand the sacrifice of God's own son, if we take this seriously. I think it's absolutely terrifying to think there is a God that would demand that. This is partially why I have been a Christian all my life, but I'm also one who is continually uncomfortable with that. For me, it's not a bad way to participate in a religion with some degree of discomfort and ambivalence about it.
Yeah. Well, I love how in the two books here you talk about the role of doubt as being an active and a healthy, positive part of the faith walk. That's taken me. I grew up in an environment where you're not supposed to doubt, and I have found, just like I used to think, oh, atheists are my enemy. No, like a good, a good conversation, a good-natured atheist is a wonderful, or the writings of guy behind me, Laird Barron. Like he's not would say he's not a religious person, but his his views have helped me to understand my own views better. A good conversation with an atheist can be for me, a Christian, very productive, and I can be really grateful for that now. But yeah, that's the whole idea here of doubt being a part of a healthy, growing faith is very was for me very helpful, and I'm glad that you brought that up in your books. I would say, I guess to me, the most frightening thought of religious doctrine, or within, let's say, Christian theology, certainly the doctrine of hell is extremely disturbing, and I've just had to jettison it. I mean, only a few years ago, when my son became an atheist, told me he was an atheist. Not that he doesn't want to believe in God, he's naturally a skeptic. He's very scientifically minded, and it kind of forced me to say, do I really believe in this? Because if I do believe in the doctrine of hell, then why am I not out warning everybody? There's this, we call him God, but he's a monster.
Yeah.
And he will, they're like, I know our idea of justice is that the punishment should fit the crime. Like, what crime could possibly deserve eternal conscious torment that you could never be redeemed from? So I've just had to kind of jettison that. So that's no longer, Gemma, you're dying to say something I can see.
It seems like a very human idea to me.
Yes.
And I think there's something to be said for the fact that there's a version of hell in almost every mythology, and most mythologies before Christianity bring in the idea of a hell where it's like, the hell of getting cut apart, the hell of being, hung upside down, the hell of being boiled alive, whatever. It just sounds very human to me. And that's not enough. I'm sorry. Yeah. If you're going to be a God, the only God responsible for everything, you got to give me something a little bit grander.
I just, with the mind, the very limited mind I have, all I can do is try to take on the ideas of this Christian tradition that I value, that I cherish, and then try to wrestle with it as best I can with a very limited mind, and trust that there's some grace for everything I get wrong. And then Brandon, you too, I think you say in one of the two books that it can't just be settling, like faith really being. I mean, you quote a particular religious scholar, but faith being really about trust rather than acknowledging the correct set of beliefs. And like that to me is like, there's something alive there. I love that.
Yeah.
But even if you've left religion behind, I mean, I feel like you're still so shaped by whatever you grew up with.
Oh yeah.
That it's like you have an ethics that's still there and that you never quite get away from.
Absolutely. You even if you decide, I don't agree with that, I don't believe that anymore, I feel like you're still going to be running from it. And that's not just religion, it's any aspect of childhood. There's no cure for childhood. You're always going to be carrying that to a degree. Right. But I guess to me the scariest idea, I remember, I think I was just driving one day to work and thinking about this whole idea of the incarnation, and the crucifixion, but really the incarnation in particular, that God, for the sake of humanity, would change himself irrevocably, because this picture we have of the resurrection and the ascension is God, the Son in the flesh, is rising up to heaven to sit on the right side of the throne of God, but he's in a resurrected body, the kind of body that Paul just says the believers who are going to be raised on the last day will all have. but he's like in a body for the rest of every eternity, I guess. God has changed himself irrevocably for the sake of humans. And I just remember thinking that and just shivering in fear. I think it was probably the most worshipful I've ever been. That's the idea that scares me. What God will do to himself for us, I suppose, is the scariest thing I can think of. So on that happy note, thanks everyone for joining. What a great conversation. Thank you, Brandon.
Man,
seriously, like, thanks for bringing these books, books to us. And this has been great. Gemma and Brian, I treasure you guys so much as artists and thinkers, and today as conversation partners. What great fun. I hope we'll all get together sometime too, and can meet and be in the same place and time and get to have some drinks together.
That would be great.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone so much. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for watching. And again, go out to my Substack or to the YouTube comments and leave us your thoughts from your perspective and whatever religious background you have, or a background of not being religious at all. These are all more than anything, they're human conversations. They're part of what it means to be human and to wrestle with these big questions and these big ideas. And with that, we will say good night. Thanks, everyone.